This is the Rising Tide Startups podcast, where we chat with startup founders from all over the globe to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my special guest today is Marin Smiljanic. Is that even in the ballpark?
Yeah, we're pretty close to the ballpark. Yeah, good job, Kevin.
Okay, you get one shot at this, so please tell us the real pronunciation.
It's Marin Smiljanic.
Okay, well, you know what? There's nothing like going to the source for the real deal. So, Marin, thanks again for joining us today. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, but we have a unique way of doing it here on Rising Tide. I just ask people, if you and I met at like a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
Right. So basically, like I would first off go with, my sort of background in life, which is I'm an engineer, a software engineer, a programmer, whatever, glorified name you want to put to it. And basically I had sort of the combination of diverse experiences in both startups in the earliest stages, from my own to, other startups that I've been in, all the way to big tech companies like Facebook and Amazon.
Yeah.
So essentially, I mostly like working on, AI related stuff, difficult algorithmic stuff, distributed systems, and so on and so forth. And so my current role, like after all this, roller coaster, is that I'm the co-founder and CEO of Omni Search, a next generation search company.
So did I hear on a previous episode that your father also had a software company?
That is actually true, yes. So this was one of the main motivations for me to go into entrepreneurship. So my dad, he used to run a software company for like 20 years before exiting it. But yes, like growing up and seeing him do this basically motivated me to, was one of the main motivators that got me into the whole game.
So obviously it's Eastern European origin, the name is. So what country particular was it? Did I also hear maybe Croatia?
Yep, Croatia's just about right. You might be a little bit confused by my clean English, but we did learn it, when we were very, very little. But yes, Croatia is my home country. It's actually also for Omni Search, where the engineering team is based in. So this is where I grew up. This is where I went into high school, like one of the greatest high schools anywhere in the region, with a huge focus on math and computer science. Mm-hmm. So really, really good. And to college too. And then after college, well, also during college for internships, but later on I went to Silicon Valley and then to Canada for basically all of my career.
Now, I'm trying to guess here, like Robert Herjavec from like Shark Tank. There's got to be a common heritage there.
Yes. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure whether he was born here or whether he was born in Canada, but definitely same roots.
So we had another founder on just recently, within the last month, I think, that has a startup with it that helps Ukrainian really tech mm-hmm. developers, find jobs. And mm-hmm. I mean, Eastern Europe is such a hotbed for tech. I mean, it's amazing that you hear about just different areas, but I mean, there's so much coming out of Eastern Europe, that is so cutting edge. So why is that?
I would say because like the engineering education and the math education, generally STEM is at a very high level. Mm-hmm. And especially since, like I said, I mentioned our high school, which is really one of the best ones. But essentially, like this kind of education, kind of of the more hardcore type in STEM areas, begins fairly early on. And so by the time people are out of college, they already will have had a certain amount of experience mm-hmm. in, STEM areas. And so that, I think, is the most important asset that like all of these like Central to Eastern European countries have. And there is also the flip side, which is that definitely not even close to US levels when it comes to sales and marketing talent. But then again, this is something that I think will come through, through the passage of time, since everyone is now exposed to the top level startups everywhere in the world and to the resources and so forth. I think you just need a little bit more muscle memory and a little bit more people who have been there and done that.
Well, certainly the Earth is flat. There's a global village. I mean, it is, with the advent of the internet. I mean, it's like, country boundaries have fallen. And work is asynchronous. 24/7 type thing, and you can work from anywhere. So, it is amazing to look back at kind of your fairly young journey, but I mean, so much was packed into such a short period of time. I mean, you've gone from big tech to tech startup, and walk us through just the major differences in those two environments.
So I think there's plenty, and I think there's even plenty between like big tech and working at smaller but high growing startups, and then even more when you work for your own startup. So I think that one of the cool things in a big tech company is that you can specialize more. Like, you can really develop expertise. Yeah. You can dive deeper into an area. Like, for instance, you'll have AWS, which is my alma mater, so to speak. Out of all the organizations I was in before starting my own startups, that's probably the one that I identify the most with. And there, like, basically it's an exceptionally good school, university, even for developing distributed systems and designing distributed systems, and making sure that you design systems of machines, of computers that are globally present, globally available, that handle hundreds of thousands of machines, that handle, like, I don't know, millions of requests per second and so forth. And so that kind of a specialization you will not get at a startup, I believe. So these, going deeper into these kind of areas, that's more of a big company thing, and it can be wonderful. Like, to me, although I was there for only 3 years, I was still very much, I still loved this aspect of it. The downside, of course, is you I would even say overly specialize. You develop. Your mental model gets trained too much on the specifics of the company, and even the organization within the company that you have, and that risks at the limit not being very transferable to other places. You also do kind of feel like being a small wheel in a huge machine, a huge organism. So with a startup, like when you're doing your own startup, all of that goes away. You're definitely in the jack of all trades mode. Like, if you're the CEO, which is like the most general position, you gotta be good at hiring people. You gotta be good at tech. You gotta be good at selling, at least reasonably good at all of these things. Good at fundraising, if you're going the venture-backed route.
Right.
So, all these things factor into startup success, and it's a very, very different story. But again, I do feel you get more control over your own destiny. You get to pick your own people. You get to pick the projects you particularly like and are motivated to work on, and so forth. So, two very different worlds, each with its own set of benefits.
It's almost a blessing and a curse. Everything that has a blessing and a curse side to it.
And if I may, like, I wouldn't be so religious as to say one is definitely better than the other. I wouldn't even go necessarily down the impact route and say, oh, you're definitely going to have more impact in a startup. Well, not necessarily, because maybe that was the case 2000 to 2010. You look at 2010 to 2020, odds are, if you were working on AWS or on one of the AI companies, big ones, chances are that you would have had more of an impact than working for a startup. So this, again, like, the pendulum swings in different ways, and you gotta read the moment and see where it is.
So it's interesting. I mean, I've interviewed more than 300 people on this podcast, over the last 5 years or so. And the thing that is really interesting is how many people have come out of the corporate side of things into startup world. And there's a long list of people that did it just out of necessity. Like they had an idea, they kind of wanted to launch something, and they just overnight became a business owner. But the problem was that they weren't really entrepreneurial. They were literally just a business owner. They were just the CEO, overnight, but they didn't have that kind of that genetic disposition that says, you know what, I can make that shift in lifestyle, can make that shift in expectations. I can become the boss where I used to, take orders in essence, so that's a pretty momentous shift. What's been one of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome in making that move?
Well, I think that there is a couple of different things. Like, first of all, and I think this is like the first filter that disqualifies a whole lot of, ideas or, business ventures. And this is, you got to have what they like now even kind of, ad nauseum call founder market fit. Or founder product, whatever variant of that you may have heard, which means like this has got to be a product that the founder has, some connection to, both emotionally and from a talent perspective, from an experience perspective. There are exceptions to this, like for instance, when the 19-year-olds build Facebook or Snapchat or stuff like this. Although even there, I would say that it's underrated how much of experts they were in these areas. But okay, like say that there are some exceptions. Usually you'll need to have something that really keeps you motivated, and that is a problem that you can see yourself working on for 10 years. So that, I think, is the first hurdle that you got to clear. This has got to click. Secondly, I always found it that, and you touched really, really well on this, which is, you need to manage the expectations, and you need to be able to, work with reduced salaries for a fairly long time. Usually, this was definitely
including your own,
definitely including your own, especially your own.
Yeah, especially your own. That's right.
That was the case for me when I left Amazon. So you got to be used to that, and so I generally, my strategy has always been to keep my lifestyle less opulent than it could have potentially been, just to keep that sort of an option, and not to fall too far down if I needed to make these sacrifices. But I think, it's like frugality and being okay with lower earnings, as well as having that connection to the problem.
You mentioned something just kind of in passing that I don't want to fly by, the whole idea, and I've had it because we've had this conversation in so many interviews. Like, how important is it for the founder to be passionate about the problem he's trying to solve or she's trying to solve? And it's split. There are some that go, hey, entrepreneurs just see opportunity. They see opportunity to, there's product market fit. They don't care if they're selling widgets or weather forecasts. I mean, it doesn't matter. They just it's the game, it's the journey, it's the hunt, that they're in. And others are saying, absolutely, you have to be passionate about it, because there will be a time that you don't want to get out of bed. There'll be a time that you're facing an insurmountable, seemingly insurmountable obstacle that you say, I've got to have something other than just the drive for more money or the drive to succeed that carries me. How would you answer those two?
That is a very good point and a very complex question. I think that I'm not going to religiously discount either of these. I'm kind of the
spoken
opinion,
like a true politician.
It's not by any natural inclination towards that. Hopefully.
That's right. Hopefully.
Would you vote for me?
Hopefully, I'm smarter than that. Yeah.
No, but so, and I say it because of this. I'm kind of the opinion that traction heals a lot of motivation problems. Like I've seen people that have built businesses that I would never go into. It's just like they made it work. They built large organizations around it, and it's working great for them. But I don't know. I'm still kind of more on the passion side. Like I've definitely felt that, everything that I did was, very, algorithmically oriented, AI oriented, and so on and so forth. So those were the things that resonated with me the most, and where I thought that I could add the most value to, if not the world, then at least some reduced interpretation of the world. So I would lean more towards the passion side, because it is difficult to get out of bed if you're not feeling anything about the problem. But it's more than the problem; it's the team, it's the state of the company, and so on and so forth. So different factors, but more on the passion side for me.
What you just said there is really a great add-on that says it's not just about the product, it's not just about the service. It is also about the team. It's also about the company you're building and the community you're building around that, whether it's a client base and all those things, and kind of intertwined into one. And right after we hear from our sponsors here, we're going to take a deeper dive into Omni Search and the team you've built. And now here's a quick word from one of our new sponsors on Rising Tide Startups.
Have you been wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to start? Well, now you can start a podcast in less than 24 hours. I'm David Ezel, and I'll walk you through all of the things that you need to get started today. Things like how to choose the right microphone, how to edit your audio, and how to find guests and build a pipeline of future guests. This course does a great job of keeping things high level while also diving into the things that keep most people from starting. Even better, if you use the code RISING at checkout, you'll get 20% off your purchase. But that's only if you use the code RISING at checkout. What are you waiting for? Start your podcast today.
We are back, and we want to take a little deeper dive right now into Omni Search. So, Marin, talk us through the company, the founding of the company, what kind of got it started and where you are today.
Yeah, no, totally. So basically, the main motivation, the main spark sort of that led to Omni Search was when I was at Amazon. So I was on fairly technically complex teams, right? And so what we often needed to do is we had this internal portal that had tons of training videos. And you can imagine these were like long videos, these could be an hour long. They were very densely packed with technical content and so on and so forth. And the main problem was you couldn't really look up information inside those. Like you could search for a specific video by title or something along these lines, but you couldn't really find anything inside them. Like you couldn't look up, a single little piece of information, go straight to where it was explained, consume that little snippet, and then be on your way doing something more productive. And so we figured that this should actually be solved and, packaged into a product and sold to companies. So, this is kind of in stark contrast to many of the search players. When I say search, I don't mean like Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo. I mean more the business-oriented search solutions that had been traditionally very much focused purely on textual data. And so for us, our main value proposition is not only, the use case that I outlined, but we'll index any type of content and make it searchable just as easily as text. So imagine you're running, say, a Coursera. Wow. Imagine you're running, say, a Coursera. And again, Coursera is not a customer, but, just illustrating it. But basically, what you could achieve by implementing OmniSearch into your platform is imagine a search functionality where you have a student that is looking for pieces of information. They just type something in. They immediately see exactly where it is in videos, in lectures, in handouts, in presentations, and so forth, and they can jump straight to it. So fundamentally different search experience, far richer, far fuller. So, this is the kind of thing that we want every site, every platform in the world to have.
That's absolutely amazing. And I'm going to show my ignorance here for just a moment, and you quickly correct it, but I'm picturing almost there has to be like a transcript that's running behind video content. How does it, without revealing any company secrets, I mean, how does it's easy to see how it would search text. it's much more difficult for the a layman like myself to understand how you would search video content, with the same accuracy and the same, you understand the question?
Yeah, of course. So there's actually a name for this stuff, which is called multimodal search. And this is something that's, been pioneered only in the past couple of years. But the essence is you either have types of data that can easily map onto text. So this is text itself, it's audio, it's documents that get OCR'd, and so on and so forth. But you then also have the more visual parts, like this is, for instance, getting, indexing the objects from a video, or indexing text that appears in a video, or indexing, logos or people or something like this. And so this basically, what is the underlying technology behind that is called vector search, which is essentially something that's only been, I think, really in the spotlight for the past couple of years, maybe even last year. I mean, maybe like 5 years, but it only became a big thing in the last year. But basically what you'll have there is you'll have an underlying neural network that, works on multiple types of data, including text, and that is able to kind of cross-reference these things in a very intuitive way, and figure out. Yeah. So basically, it transforms all the search queries into very simple geometric representations, like you're just doing nearest neighbors, essentially.
Right. I mean, it almost, in layman's terms, it's almost like reducing it to like binary, like almost a code, that it can read. So is the vector search primarily for like copyright infringement? Is it what's its main use case?
I would put it like this. When you imagine how you're searching on Google, which is like you'll input keywords and you'll get results that have these keywords. So what vector search does is it allows it is less accurate, I would say, than these kind of traditional search methods. But what you get with that is a lot more tolerance to fuzziness, tolerance to typos, and also easier handling of more conceptual queries. So vector search is extremely broad, but you can expect that you'll have, say, documents that talk about cats and dogs, and that those will be returned when you query for animal, right? Because it understands the relationships between these things. And then also you have, the visual parts, which is that, you can write in dog, and you can actually fetch pictures of dogs. You can say dog jumping through hoop or whatever. You can find those pictures as well. And so you really have, it's an extremely widely applicable search technology, and you have it all over the place. I think even Google uses it under the hood for certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can see all kinds of use cases, even medical records and
yes,
just absolutely. Those types of things that are, you would want to quickly search in, like you said, a multimodal fashion. But it seems like high tech, but it has a broad, like we just mentioned, a broad use case. So what have you seen? Like when was Omni Search launched, and what kind of growth have you seen since its inception?
Yeah, so we launched in 2021, like later in 2021. We were formally incorporated in April 2021. And we've seen some really good growth there. So our initial vertical, this is kind of why I always go back to Coursera or whatever equivalent cases. Our first vertical was online education. Mm-hmm. And so there we were able to get our first traction, get our first several dozen customers. And we've really been seeing awesome growth. I think that in 2023, so since the start of 2023, we more than tripled our MRR. So that's already something really good. And we're seeing some very good growth. And also we've now recently expanded to another key vertical, which is media. And that's deliberately very broadly defined, because you have broadcasters, you have streaming platforms, you have publishers like, imagine a Wall Street Journal or something like this. But media is a huge use case because the video search capabilities that they need, they're more advanced than any other vertical we've seen so far.
Does YouTube have this capability?
YouTube, so the visual parts, no. Searching transcripts to some extent, meaning for a fraction of their videos. I don't think they index all of them. For the visual parts, I don't think so, at least not from what I've seen. But regardless, YouTube isn't really oriented towards business. Like they wouldn't offer this as a service. So that kind of makes it. So I have no doubt that Google has a lot of the technology under the hood, but they're just not making it available to businesses.
I'm just thinking though, just the depth and breadth of search capabilities if you somehow married Omni Search with YouTube's database.
Yes,
I mean, just the absolute, I mean, exponentially you would change the search function, on Google and, in any search engine, and YouTube being, what, the second largest search engine in the world. I mean,
basically it's just behind Google itself.
Yeah, behind Google itself. So so I'm trying to make that happen, and I get 10% of any partnership deal you come up with. So try to have a finder's fee.
Let's get that deal done and then retire. Exactly. But right. No, that would be great.
Right. I hear the Croatian coast is a beautiful place to spend your retirement years. So
there's been a lot of ongoing vitriolic debate around the prices, but let us hope that they normalize.
I certainly get it. Well, it's this really is geared toward helping startup founders, helping those that either have done it or they're in the process of it, or they're sitting in the cube thinking, I've got to break out of here and do something. So we always want to leave them with something really tangible, with a couple of really great nuggets of wisdom, from our guests, that things they have learned, and kind of being a little ahead of the listeners on the journey. So wrap us up today with like one or two things that you think are really germane to just startups in general, just founding startups and leading teams and creating companies, and things that would be very helpful regardless of the industry.
Mm-hmm. So I would say always pick your partners really well, because this has to be somebody, like, you'll spend so much time with them and so much effort, working towards the same goal with them, that this has to be something that clicks both on a technical and skill level, but also at a personal level.
Right.
So I think that's super important. So if you probably don't jump into it with somebody you haven't known for a reasonably long time, but yeah, definitely do your vetting, do your due diligence there. Other thing, I think that definitely, like, the passion part, regardless of the counterpoint to that, is still very important. So I think that finding a problem you'll be passionate about will help you get out of bed more easily when things aren't going great. And I always, going a little bit on the more practical nitty-gritty side, I would say, like, try at least to some extent to have some sort of a safety net. So for technical founders, this will usually be like, you can apply to a TopTal or Upwork or some other, freelancer marketplace / agency, whatever you want to call it, where you can basically, move around your availability as you see fit. And then you can take on projects if your, runway for the startup runs dangerously low. So that's actually a trick that I used. I didn't do a whole lot of projects, but it was very important to know that I had this safety net. Now, I can't talk with a lot of authority about non-technical founders because I don't think it works quite as well for them. But maybe this is like a productive direction to think in.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, some are like, no way, burn the boats. You are all in. You burn that safety net, because you got to have the the fear of failure that's like barking the wolf at the door, so to
Oh,
speak.
the fear of failure is strong enough. But isn't this thing like Tyson's guy said, that fear is like fire. It can cook your dinner or it can burn your house down. So I prefer to keep it at the cook your dinner level.
That is so true. That is so true. Well, Marin, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? You just a really quick thought you want to wrap us up with today, and just let people know where's the best place to find you.
I think the only thing I can say to people that are earlier along in the journey is definitely consider doing startups as a legitimate career option. I think if done right, it can be far more fulfilling than a big company job. Yeah. And yeah, just give it a shot. Don't be awfully afraid of failure. And yeah, so best ways to reach me, my email, marin@omnisearch.ai. Follow OmniSearch on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And yeah, happy to, share any advice or, answer any questions that, founders earlier on in the journey might have. Very happy to do that always.
Well, man, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today, and it's just been a great chat, and I've really enjoyed just hearing your story. And we chased a number of different rabbits in different directions, but we wrapped it up in a bow at the end. And just I want to have you on in a couple of years after you sign that big deal with YouTube, and we can hear how that transition went.
Awesome.
But just thank you again for just taking time this afternoon in your busy schedule to really just to play your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Marin, thanks again. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Kevin. Great talking. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I hope you heard some great takeaways from our guests today. Make sure you reach out to them, and thank you again for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.